I'm not sure there is such a gloom about Europe. And in fact, I've been meeting with clients coming through Paris in record numbers from the US,
I'm
from
shocked.
Asia. Yeah, no.
Wait, do you have table 4 or table 5 at Tour d'Argent?
No, not just that, but actually asking about Europe because they realize there's something really interesting starting to happen. And you're absolutely right to single out Germany because this is where the big pivot in sentiment around Europe started. And that was the announcement by Chancellor Merz, who wasn't even Chancellor at the time, that Germany was going to invest over €1 trillion in infrastructure and in defense over the next 10 years. And that then opened the door to the European Commission announcing a plan to rearm Europe to the tune of another €800 billion. And that led to an acceleration of all the structural reform agenda that had been outlined in the Draghi report last year, but frankly wasn't going anywhere in a hurry. And all of a sudden, you see people going through Brussels and saying, this is a different atmosphere than I've known my entire life. There is a wind of change. There is a desire to listen to corporates and to do things to actually boost growth as a priority. And so, Europe's economy was, not growing very fast last year or the previous year compared to the US. But now you're seeing this inversion of trajectories with US economy slowing down and in several dimensions underperforming expectations. And on the other hand, Europe's economy growing faster than most people expected. I mean, 0.6% Q on Q in Q1 GDP. That's just like much higher than anybody expected.
Mateos y Lago is measuring it the way the Europeans measure it. All we know is after Alan Greenspan, it's a big number. That's my sophisticated analysis.
Germany can certainly fund that type of investment. How about the rest of Europe? I mean, I think a lot of the markets less sure about other parts of Europe being able to make similar types of commitments.
Well, one thing that's been really interesting is what's been happening to spreads in the Eurozone. You could have thought, well, German yields go up, not massively, but they go up. This is bad news for the rest of Europe, which has much higher debt loads. France, Italy, Spain, and the likes. Their spreads should go up, and actually the opposite has happened. Or in the case of Italy, or the other spreads have stayed the same. And why is that? I think it's because the market is correctly anticipating that this German spending is going to increase the growth trajectory, and the whole of the Eurozone is going to benefit from that. And that's why, now, bear in mind, none of these other countries, the high debt countries, are planning to increase their deficits. They're going to rejig between defense and other things. But the fact that the fiscally austere countries like Germany and others are prepared to do more, and the others are not going wild and retaining the somewhat orthodox plans that they had, that's good news, and that's why the spreads haven't moved. So this is the markets essentially validating the fiscal plans.
The rhetoric, particularly out of the Trump administration, is, I'm going to call it just flat out anti-Europe. Maybe there's a nuance to that I'm missing. Is Europe the secret here into the equity performance and the investment? Are we finally seeing companies and even cultures in governments more of an Anglo-American capitalist model? Our stereotype of Americans is, well, okay, Denmark's socialist and everything else is sort of almost, that's the stereotype. But are we getting more towards a rampant capitalism at the margin in Europe?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think if you're talking about social models, social protections, there's no desire to move away from that. There is, however, more of a Keynesian turn. Perhaps you could say that, not for the sake of turning Keynesian, but in the case of Germany, because they realize they've underinvested in public infrastructure, they've underinvested in defense. So as a matter of fact, you're going to see a lot more public spending in Germany and places that we're not doing enough of it. And where Europe may be also turning more Anglo-Saxon is in the effort to simplify the regulatory burden. Now, interestingly, they've got this kind of cute semantic obsession with not talking about deregulation.
Exactly.
The word is simplification, but nevertheless, this is something Europe needed. And I think it's quite plausible that the US was an inspiration for going in that direction, and now it's happening.